Hey guys, tonight we begin with the gentle sound of coughing. Not your normal, dry throat from too much talking kind of cough. No, this one's deep, wet, rattling like a bag of marbles in a meat sack. It's the sound of a medieval peasant waking up with the plague, and yes, that's exactly the vibe we're going for tonight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always amazing to see who's winding down with a little historically accurate misery. Now turn down the lights, maybe pull your blanket a little higher, and let's ease into the story of why being a peasant during the Black Death was possibly the worst full-time job in human history. It's 1348. You live in a village so small it doesn't even have a name on any map, mostly because no one you know can read, and maps are about as useful to you as a philosopher's debate on the moon's humours. Your house is made of sticks, mud, and good intentions. It's also shared with your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your children, and a goat who judges you silently while chewing your roof. You're a serf. Which is a nice medieval way of saying free-ish. You work the land, but not for yourself. You pay your local lord in grain, labour, and sometimes a portion of your soul. In return, he protects you from things like bandits, wild animals, and starvation. Except he doesn't really. That's on you. Your average day starts before dawn and ends when your arms stop working. You're a human plough, a professional dirt wrangler, and an involuntary weather forecaster. If you're not tilling the fields, you're weeding them. If you're not weeding, you're harvesting. And if you're not harvesting, you're dead. Because nothing in this life pauses for exhaustion. Your diet? Bread. More bread. Sometimes a vegetable. Occasionally for spice, a pebble. Meat is rare and usually smells a bit off, but you eat it anyway because the only alternative is dying slightly faster. There's no soap, no toilet, no dental plan. You rinse your face with cold rainwater and hope for the best. Bathing is considered either dangerous, suspicious, or sinful, and often all three. You probably have fleas, worms, and a rash somewhere you've stopped thinking about. But so does everyone else. So who cares? Still, for all its flaws, life has a rhythm. You know your place. You know your tools. You know your village, its gossip, its saints, its sins. You dance on feast days. You sing during planting season. You argue over pigs. You exist. And then the coughing starts. At first, it's just someone in the next village. Then it's the miller's wife. Then it's your neighbour's youngest son, the one with the bright eyes and the missing front tooth. The plague doesn't knock on the door, it slithers in. No one understands how it spreads. They just know that one day you're fine, and the next you've got black boils under your armpits and a priest at your bedside mumbling like he's already given up. You bury the dead fast, sometimes without names, sometimes without digging too deep. The air thickens with fear. The village well is quiet now. No one touches, no one lingers. The bell tolls more often than the rooster crows. You try to pray, but even the priest looks afraid. You try to flee, but you have nowhere to go. You're a peasant. You're bound to the land. If you leave, you starve. If you stay, you might die coughing blood into your dinner bowl. And yet, you keep going. Because someone has to bake the bread. Someone has to feed the animals. Someone has to care for the children, patch the roof, grind the grain, bury the bodies. You have no choice but to live, even as the world around you dies. But here's where it gets strange. The more people die, the more your life begins to change. Suddenly, you're valuable. Lords are desperate for labourers. Fields are going fallow, entire villages are empty, and you, a peasant, can ask for wages, you can negotiate, you can walk away. You're still poor, still filthy, still exhausted, but for the first time in your life you are powerful. Now, of course, this doesn't end well for everyone. Some lords fight back, the kings pass laws, the church says it's all divine punishment, and peasants, well, some of them revolt, others quietly build better lives. Most just try to get through one more day. But the Black Death didn't just take lives, it cracked history open. So tonight we begin this journey through what it really meant to be a peasant during this dark and terrible time. Not as a statistic, but as a person. Someone with a beating heart, a sore back, and a stubborn will to survive. Over the next few nights we'll walk together through the huts and fields, across muddy village greens and silent chapels, into kitchens, sick rooms and festival halls. We'll explore what daily life felt like, what food you ate, what fears you carried, who you loved, how you healed, and what it meant to live on the brink of death and keep going anyway. So pull the blankets close, sink deeper into your bed, and now we'll step inside your home, where life, death, livestock, and family all share the same smoky, straw-filled room. So you step inside your house. And yes, house is a strong word. Technically it has a door. Technically it has a roof. But what it really is a rectangular mud box with a thatched lid and a smoke problem. And you share this box with your entire family. That means your parents, your spouse, your children, your surviving cousin, your cousin's wife, and at least one deeply suspicious goat who keeps trying to sleep in the cooking pot. Inside it's always a little damp, the kind of damp that gets into your bones and settles there, like an unwelcome guest who refuses to leave. The air smells like smoke, sweat, and boiled cabbage, which, to be fair, is also what dinner smells like, so maybe that's a 2-for-1. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof where the smoke from the central fire is supposed to escape. It doesn't. Instead, it curls around your head and stings your eyes while you stir the stew. You get used to squinting. You sleep on a straw mattress, not a bed. Not even a mattress, really. More like a large sack stuffed with itchy vegetation and occasional beetles. Everyone sleeps in the same room. There's no privacy, and no one expects it. The concept of alone time won't be invented for another 700 years. During the day, the room is full of motion. Children playing with carved sticks, someone spinning wool, someone else churning butter with the look of a person who'd rather be anywhere else. You work here, eat here, argue here, and sometimes you just sit by the fire and listen to it crackle, pretending for a moment that things aren't as bad as they are. And of course there's the coughing. It's always there now. Somewhere in the house someone is coughing. You hear it in the middle of the night, soft and wheezing. You hear it while grinding grain, while patching a cloak, while dipping candles. It's inescapable. It sits in the corner like an unwelcome spirit, reminding you that the plague doesn't knock. It slips in under the door and makes itself at home. If someone falls ill, you don't call a doctor, there are none. The priest might come by, offer last rites, but even he's stopped visiting most homes. You're on your own. You boil herbs, you whisper prayers, you hang charms above the door, a sprig of rosemary, a little wax figure meant to keep evil out. You've never believed in those things, not really. But these days, you believe in anything that hasn't let you down yet. And still, you keep the fire going. You keep the stew boiling. Because food still needs to be made. Clothes still need mending. The animals still need feeding. Life inside a peasant home doesn't pause just because death is waiting outside. You've learned to spot which children are still sleeping and which are just quiet. You've learned how to comfort your mother without making promises. You've learned to save your tears for when you're outside. Because there's no room for them in here. Not with all the people. and not with the goat watching you. And yet there's something strangely solid about this place. It creaks, it leaks, it smells like despair half the time, but it holds your people, your family, your tiny stubborn world. This is where you gather when the bells toll. This is where you celebrate the harvest. This is where you sit shoulder to shoulder in the dark, listening to the wind outside and praying it passes over your house. You are poor, you are tired, you are afraid, but in this one room you are not alone. And in a time like this, that counts for everything. Still, you can't stay inside forever, because the home only survives if the fields are fed. The grain must be planted, the weeds pulled, the soil turned. Even now, especially now, the land demands your hands. So you grab your cloak, step outside, and walk the path to the fields with your hoe in one hand and a prayer in your chest. Because next we're heading to the heart of peasant survival. The land itself, the work, the aching backs and blistered palms, the dirt that feeds you and buries you. You're outside now, walking through morning mist that smells faintly of wet hay, cow dung and frost-covered soil. A rooster crows like it's being paid to be annoying. Somewhere behind you a child cries. But out here, the world is still. Not peaceful, just quiet in that heavy, suffocating way that only comes when more people are dying than living. Your boots squelch through the muck as you follow the same path you've walked since childhood. It winds past the broken fence posts, the shallow grave where you buried your last lamb, and the spot where old Goethe used to sit and gossip while pretending to mend nets. She died 3 weeks ago, or was it 4? Time is getting slippery lately. The field looks almost exactly the same as it did before the plague arrived. Furrowed earth, patches of rye, scraggly winter cabbage. But it feels different now, emptier. Not just because of the dead, but because of the silence they left behind. It's easy to forget how loud farming used to be. There was always someone shouting, someone laughing, someone swearing about a broken plough or a runaway pig. But now it's mostly wind and birds and the occasional clink of tools. People still work, they have to, but no one really talks anymore. What's left to say? Your family owns nothing. This land belongs to the Lord and you're just borrowing it, paying your rent in the form of back-breaking labour and vague hope. You don't get paid in coin, you don't get days off, you don't get to quit. You till the soil because it's the only way to keep the people inside your tiny mud house from starving to death. And during the plague, that job's gotten even harder. There are fewer people now, fewer hands, fewer oxen, fewer tools that still work. Some days it feels like you're farming with ghosts. The village reeve keeps a tally of which families have lost the most. It's not official. He just needs to know who's still capable of harvesting barley come summer. Last week he crossed off 5 names and didn't bother replacing them. You dig into the soil with your hoe, a wooden shaft with a rusted iron blade barely clinging to it. Every swing makes your shoulders ache. The blisters on your hands opened up yesterday and are already starting to harden over. You'll get calluses eventually if you live that long. Farming isn't just hard, it's unrelenting. You plant in spring, weed in summer, harvest in fall. In winter, you pray. The fields don't care if you're grieving. They don't care that your brother is lying in bed, coughing up blood. They need tending, because no matter how bad the plague gets, people still need to eat. There's no such thing as food security. If the crops fail, there's no warehouse to raid, no emergency supply truck coming over the hill. You'll eat boiled bark if you're lucky. If not, you'll eat nothing. You glance at your neighbour's strip, a narrow plot 2 ridges over. It hasn't been touched in weeks. The house behind it is boarded up. No smoke from the chimney. You don't ask questions anymore. If someone stops showing up, you just assume the worst. Still, the work has to be done. So you pull weeds until your knees creak and your back feels like someone tried to fold you in half. You plant seed with numb fingers. You scatter manure, mend fences, check for rot. You do it all without complaining, because complaining wastes breath, and breath is in short supply these days. Occasionally there's a small reward, a patch of healthy onions, a potato that isn't entirely rotted through, a crow chased off by a well-thrown stone. You take the victories where you can get them. And then there's the weather. You'd think with a pandemic wiping out half the village, nature might go easy on you. But no, it rains when it shouldn't, and it doesn't rain when it must. Too much sun scorches the barley. Not enough sun stunts the wheat. Sometimes it hails in May just to remind you that the universe doesn't take requests. You stop for a moment and look up at the sky, grey, sullen, indifferent. You spit on the ground and mutter something rude. It doesn't help, but it makes you feel better. Back to work. You pass a half-dug ditch where someone was trying to irrigate their carrots. The shovel's still there, sticking out of the dirt like a grave marker. You wonder who it belonged to. Then you decide not to wonder. Thinking too much gets you in trouble these days. Your stomach growls. You didn't eat breakfast. There wasn't anything left. Just the heel of a loaf that went mouldy overnight and a smear of something that used to be cheese. You considered it, briefly. But even desperation has standards. You think about what you could eat, what you might find, and that's when your mind starts drifting. Not from fatigue, but from hunger. You start scanning the hedgerows, the base of trees, the edges of the field where weeds grow thick. There might be mushrooms, wild garlic, nettles, sorrel, something green and edible and not yet claimed by rabbits. This is how peasants survive. They don't just farm, they forage, they scavenge, they beg, they steal when they must, lie when they have to, and barter when there's still someone alive to trade with. The fieldwork may feed the village, but the little things you find in the cracks of the world, that's what keeps your family alive between harvests. You feel the ache settling deeper into your bones, the kind of ache that isn't just from labour, but from grief. Grief for the people who used to work beside you, for the ones who should be here now, for the way the land feels too big and too quiet all at once. You rest for a minute, leaning on your hoe, watching the wind ripple through the tall grass. Somewhere a raven calls. You've heard the priests say they're bad omens. But then again, what isn't these days? You look down at your hands, caked in dirt, cracked, bleeding in places you can't afford to bandage. These are not the hands of someone who writes history. They're the hands of someone who lives it, quietly, painfully, relentlessly. And tomorrow you'll be back out here again. Because the field doesn't care how tired you are. It only knows what's been planted and what hasn't. But for now it's enough. You sling your hoe over your shoulder, start the slow walk back toward the house. Your legs are trembling slightly, but you don't stop. You think about what you might eat when you get home, if there's anything left, if your partner managed to barter something, if the stew pot has anything more than boiled water and wishful thinking. Because next we're stepping into the world of medieval food, the foraging, the feasts, the famine, and all the desperate creativity it took just to make something vaguely edible. And what happens when all the grain runs out? By the time you return from the fields, the air inside the house is thick with the scent of boiled something. It's a smell you know well. A kind of sour, rooty, faintly metallic aroma that suggests a soup made mostly of desperation. You duck through the doorway and lower your tools by the fire. The pot hanging over the coals is steaming gently, and someone has added a pinch of something green for colour, or maybe just for hope. Tonight, as with most nights, dinner is a gamble. It could be barley gruel thickened with cabbage leaves. It could be dried peas boiled into mush. It could be a pottage. the medieval catch-all word for anything too soupy to stab but too solid to drink. Whatever it is, it's warm, and right now, that's enough. Most peasants in the 14th century Europe lived on a diet that modern humans would describe as medieval keto, except instead of high protein or low carb, it was mostly just low. Low on meat, low on spice, low on variety. A good day meant stale brown bread, a ladle of watery stew, and a turnip that hadn't gone soft yet. Grain was life, not in the abstract way, but in the deeply literal sense. Without grain, you starved. Barley and rye were the staples for most peasants. Wheat, of course, was reserved for the rich. Bread made from barley flour was heavy, coarse, and often laced with bits of grit from the millstone. Chew too fast and you'd chip a tooth. Not that you had many left to chip. You take a wooden spoon, scoop up a small portion, and blow gently on it. It's hot, surprisingly hot. You try not to wonder what's in it. The rule of thumb now is, if it doesn't smell rotten and doesn't crawl off the spoon, it's fair game. This is medieval cuisine in its truest form, functional, humble, and rarely delicious. Outside, the world is starving. With the Black Death cutting labour in half and trade grinding to a halt, markets have collapsed. There's no one to bake the bread or carry sacks of grain. No one to manage the mills or repair the carts. Entire regions have been reduced to makeshift foraging grounds. If the food isn't growing in your backyard, or someone else's, you're not likely to see it again. But hunger is an excellent teacher, and peasants, out of sheer necessity, become inventive. In spring and summer, foraging becomes a way of life. Wild garlic, nettles, dandelion greens, anything remotely edible is gathered, chopped and tossed into the pot. Mushrooms are more controversial. Some swear by them. Others, especially those who've watched a cousin die foaming at the mouth, are more hesitant. Herbs are used when available, not to improve flavour but to disguise decay. A little parsley can make old meat smell almost edible. Vinegar masks the scent of spoiled broth. Salt, if you can get it, is precious beyond measure. Entire bartering systems spring up around a handful of salt. It's worth more than coin, more than favours, sometimes more than family. Meat is rare, a luxury. On feast days, perhaps a piece of salted pork or a stringy hen who finally stopped laying eggs. But during the plague, livestock vanish, either from sickness, theft, or sheer panic. The wealthier landowners lock their flocks behind guarded gates. Peasants make do with rabbits, if they're lucky, or pigeons if they're fast. Cats and dogs occasionally disappear under suspicious circumstances. No one asks too many questions. Fish is more common near rivers, though you're more likely to catch something fungal than something edible if you're not careful. The church has a lot to say about fish days versus meat days, but lately no one seems to care. When half your village is coughing up blood, arguing about dietary sins seems a little ambitious. And then there's fasting. Not the spiritual kind, the unavoidable kind. Days where the pot stays empty, when the bread is gone, when you try to trick your stomach into sleeping before it realizes there's nothing inside it. Hunger is not just physical, it's political. The lords have granaries, the church has cellars, but you have your hands, your knife, your knowledge of which weeds won't kill you. Children suffer first, the youngest lose weight fastest. You've seen the signs, sunken eyes, bloated bellies, a kind of dull stillness that makes your heart sink before you even feel their forehead. Peasants don't talk about it out loud, but everyone knows. If winter's hard, someone won't make it through. And it's never the old. Sometimes in the worst stretches, food becomes negotiable. You trade old tools, family heirlooms, pieces of clothing. Sometimes you trade things you swore you never would. No one's proud of it. No one judges. Not anymore. Dignity has its price, and hunger always collects. But not every meal is grim. There are moments, strange little flickers, where something almost joyful happens. A traveller passes through with dried figs from the south. Someone trades a hen for honeycomb. An old woman gives you a loaf made with oats and apples, and you share it with your children like it's treasure. In a world carved by death, even small flavour feels holy. And somehow, the cooking continues. Every day. You wake up, gather what you can, scrape together the least burned firewood, and fill the pot again. It's not glamorous. It's not romantic. But it is survival, and that's enough. You finish your meal. Not full, but not empty. A rare balance. The fire crackles low as you set the bowl aside. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying the scent of wood smoke and cold earth. The goat shifts in the corner, chewing thoughtfully. Someone sneezes. Someone else stirs in their sleep. And you? You sit, hands in your lap, eyes half closed, thinking about tomorrow's meal. What you'll need to find. What you might trade. Whether the well will still have water. Whether the miller's boy has returned. Because the plague might take your strength. It might take your neighbours, your tools, your fields. But it won't take your fire. Not yet. And speaking of fire, there's another one still flickering, even now, in a hut not far from yours. A place where medicine and myth live side by side. A place where illness is met not with fear, but with salves and chants, and the careful, practised hands of women who've spent a lifetime tending the sick. Next, we step into the smoky herbal world of the medieval healer, and the thin, dangerous line between medicine and magic. Your belly is no longer empty, but something in your body still feels off. It's a strange sort of heaviness, not hunger, not quite illness, just the dull ache of exhaustion mixed with the cold, creeping dread that's never far from anyone these days. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the worry. Maybe it's the cough you've been pretending not to notice. You lean against the wall of the cottage, eyes half closed. The fire has burned low. Somewhere outside, a dog howls. Or maybe it's a person. Sometimes it's hard to tell. In the corner, someone's breathing fast, shallow, uneven. And that's when you decide it's time to go see her. Every village has one. A woman, older, usually, who walks the hedgerows with a basket, muttering to herself, fingers stained green from leaves and roots. She knows the plants, the seasons, the signs. People say she was born with a call, or touched by spirits, or simply too stubborn to die. She has no official title. She's not a doctor. Those live in cities and rarely survive contact with patients. She's not a priest, though she knows a few prayers, whispered in the old tongue. You just call her the healer. And if you're lucky, she's still alive. You walk carefully, past the church, past the green, past the graves that seem to multiply each week, until you find her hut, half sunken into a hillside, roof covered in moss, door hanging slightly askew. It smells of smoke, damp wool, and something sharp and sweet you can't quite name. She doesn't greet you, just glances up from her mortar and gestures for you to sit. Around you, the world is quiet. Jars line the walls, filled with powdered bark, dried berries, bits of bone. Herbs hang in bunches from the rafters, sage, yarrow, wormwood, nettle, some for healing, some for fevers, some for rituals you don't ask about. She unwraps your hand without ceremony. The wound is red, angry, streaked with early infection. She tuts softly, then begins to work. First, she crushes a mixture of honey, garlic, and something that smells like pine resin. She packs it into the cut, binds it with linen, and mutters under her breath. Not a prayer exactly. more like a rhythm, the sound of repetition, of memory, of something older than scripture. This is healing medieval style. No scalpels, no sterilization, no degree on the wall, just instinct, tradition, and the echoes of 1,000 whispered remedies passed from one woman to another. The line between medicine and magic is paper thin, and often walked in the dark. She offers you a draught of something bitter, brewed from feverfew and foxglove. She tells you not to eat anything too hot. She tells you to rest, and she warns you, very seriously, not to tell the priest she gave you a charm. You nod. You weren't going to tell him anyway. Because even though you were taught that God heals and that medicine comes from the saints, the truth is, this feels more real, more grounded. This woman with her soot-stained fingernails and her basket full of weeds has saved more lives than all the prayers in the chapel combined. Still, it's not without risk. Everyone knows someone who's accused of witchcraft, a woman too clever, too confident, too successful at healing. One bad outcome, one dead child, one angry lord, one jealous neighbour, and the whispers start. A goat born with one eye. A stillbirth in the next village. Suddenly it's not medicine, it's devilry. And the flames follow soon after. You glance around the hut. The herbs. The charm she slipped into your pocket. The small leather pouch she handed you with strict instructions to burn if things turn worse. There's power here, but also danger. Even now, in a time of plague and panic, the church keeps a wary eye on women like her. And yet, everyone comes. When the cough won't stop. When the swelling turns black. When the priest can't, or won't, come. This is who people turn to. The healer is often also the midwife, the bone setter, the comforter, the one who tends to the dying and washes the dead. She's seen more grief than most men will in 10 lifetimes, and still she keeps going. Not because she believes she can stop death, but because she knows how to make it wait. You thank her. Not with words exactly, but with the way you meet her eyes before leaving. The way you tuck the pouch carefully into your sleeve. The way you step out of the hut a little slower than you stepped in. Outside the sun is slipping low. The graveyard across the hill catches the light just right, every cross casting a long shadow across the earth. You know half the names carved there. You've stood beside those plots with a numb face and hands full of cold dirt. You think about what comes next, about the people you'll lose, about what you'll say when you sit beside their beds and feel their skin grow cool, about how you'll lift the sheet, light the candle, close the eyes, about the prayers you'll mumble, even if you're not sure you believe them anymore, because next we'll walk to that place, to the edge of the village, where the gravedigger swings his spade and the silence is thicker than the soil. The pouch she gave you is still in your pocket. You don't take it out, you don't need to. Just having it there feels like protection, or maybe superstition, or maybe the two are the same now. The healer didn't say what was in it. You didn't ask. Everyone has their secrets, and during the plague most secrets are about how to survive, but some are about how to say goodbye. It's late afternoon now. The sky has turned a colour you don't have a word for, somewhere between ash and lavender. You cross the village green, past the smithy, the baker's empty cart, and the well with the broken rope. No one calls out to you. No one speaks unless they have to. Your boots crunch over gravel as you reach the churchyard gate. It's open. It always is now. Locked gates don't keep out death, and neither do prayers. You're here for someone, maybe a neighbour, maybe a child, maybe your brother, who stopped breathing 2 nights ago and hasn't moved since. The details don't matter anymore. Grief has become routine, like grinding grain or fetching water. A task to be done quietly, respectfully, without fuss. This is the part no one explains. When the Black Death came, it didn't just kill, it overwhelmed. People died faster than they could be buried. At first, there were proper funerals, candles, psalms, holy water. But now it's just linen, dirt, and whatever prayer you can whisper without choking. The gravedigger's already there. You've seen him before, of course. Everyone has. He's the one person always working. Digging, filling, dragging, lowering. He used to be a carpenter. Then the village needed more graves than tables. Now he carries a shovel instead of a hammer and speaks less with each passing day. He doesn't greet you, just nods. There are 5 bodies waiting today, laid out beside each other, wrapped in white cloth tied at the feet and neck. No coffins. Wood is too precious. You don't look at the bundles too long. You recognize the shape of someone's shoes. That's enough. The pit is already dug, shallow, wide. There's no time for deep graves, no space, just enough to cover the scent. The lime helps, burns the skin, but keeps the flies away. You help lower the bodies in, carefully, respectfully. There's no ceremony, no priest. The last one stopped coming weeks ago after the bishop ordered all clergy to avoid plague homes. Let God sort them, he said. That was the sermon, so now the village handles it alone. Sometimes the gravedigger says a few words, sometimes he just hums. Today he says nothing. He sprinkles a handful of dirt over the linen. You do the same. It feels like tradition, even if you just started doing it last month. In medieval Europe, the church had strict rules about burial. The dead had to be laid in consecrated ground. Prayers were essential. Funerals were sacred. But the plague didn't care. When the death toll soared, all the rules cracked. Mass graves became common. Some were official, most were not. Trenches dug outside the churchyard. Hillsides turned into burial fields. Lime poured over layers of the dead, then sealed in silence. Graves marked not with stones, but with the absence of noise where once there was life. You don't stay long after it's done. You nod to the gravedigger, he nods back. That's the closest thing to a eulogy anyone gets now. As you walk home, you pass another family headed toward the church. A father holding a bundle, a woman trailing behind, eyes red and blank. You don't ask who they lost. They don't ask who you buried. There's a kind of silent agreement now. No more names, only gestures. But not all mourning is silent. Some nights when the wind dies down, you can hear them, the keeners, women who wail for the dead, like sirens calling to the next world. The church used to ban the practice. Too pagan, they said. But lately no one stops them. Maybe the sound helps. Maybe the dead like to be remembered loudly. Back in the village, someone is ringing the bell. Once it rang for mass. Now it rings for bodies. You hear it and pause. Just one toll, that's how they count now. 1 toll per soul. You don't cry. Not here, not in public. Grief is a private thing, stored in the corners of your house, beneath your pillow, inside your chest. You save it for the moments when no one is looking, when the stew is simmering, when the fire is low, when you're peeling potatoes and suddenly remember someone's laugh. Because even in a time of plague, the world keeps turning. The crops grow, the animals need feeding, the bread has to be baked, and somehow, through it all, people still find ways to carry on. They marry, they sing, they fall in love, they fight over fences and gossip about whose goat got into whose garden. Life continues, not because it's easy, but because it refuses not to. And that's where we'll go next. Because beyond the graves and the smoke and the silence, there's still a part of village life that pulses with something stubborn, something deeply human. A heartbeat, a wedding, a hand reaching for another in the dark. Somehow, even now, people still fall in love. It might sound strange, even disrespectful. How dare anyone find joy while the world is rotting from the inside out? But if the Black Death taught people anything, it was this: life is short. So if you're going to love someone, really love them, you'd best get on with it. And so they did. Weddings haven't stopped. Not entirely. They're quieter now, less formal. No feasts, no dancing, no lace-covered cakes. Just two people, standing under the fading sun, muttering vows and hoping they survive long enough to grow old together. Or, failing that, long enough to raise the first child. Marriage in your world isn't about romance. It's a practical arrangement, a negotiation, a survival pact. Most peasants marry young, 14, 15, maybe younger if the crops are good. Courtship is short. A smile at the well, a stolen glance over the barley field, maybe a dance at midsummer if you're lucky enough to have a village that still celebrates anything. Then a whisper to the father, a nod from the mother, and suddenly you're sharing a bed with someone who snores louder than the pig. Still, there's tenderness, even now. You remember the first time someone reached for your hand, the rough calluses, the warmth, the way they didn't let go even when the priest looked disapproving. You remember pressing your forehead to someone's chest just to hear their heartbeat. Steady, human, alive. Intimacy doesn't stop because death is nearby. If anything, it becomes more urgent. You make love like it's the last thing you'll do. Sometimes it is. And despite what the church likes to preach, most peasants don't save intimacy for marriage. Not in practice, anyway. Between shared beds, short lives, and very little privacy, it's almost impossible to enforce. Even in plague times, the back corner of the hayloft has seen more than just hay. The church frowns on nearly everything. No touching before marriage, no pleasure, no desire outside procreation, but people are people. And when you live in a smoky, cramped hut with 7 other bodies, there's not much room for spiritual purity. So you take what comfort you can, in the night, under blankets, between tears, sometimes between chores. Love in your world is an act of resistance. It's a whispered joke, a stolen egg, a patch sewn into your cloak by someone who didn't have to. It's washing each other's backs with cold water, wrapping arms around someone feverish, carrying firewood for a girl you haven't yet asked to marry you. And somehow, even now, people do get married. Not for romance, not at first, but for help, for company, for a second pair of hands in the fields, for someone to raise the children with when the old folks are gone. And yes, for affection. Because even if you don't know the word trauma, you know what it feels like to lose 5 friends in a week. You know what it's like to sit up all night with someone who might not live till morning. To bury a baby. To bury a mother. To stand at the edge of a pit and realise you're not sure if you're mourning or just exhausted. So when someone puts a hand on your back and doesn't say anything, just stays there, warm, steady, solid, that's not small. That's everything. Medieval peasants were not unfeeling, joyless wretches. They laughed. A lot, actually. Gallows humour mostly. Dirty jokes. Quiet flirting over grain sacks. Love notes scratched into barn beams. They sang songs with far too many verses about far too few things, and they cherished whatever little bits of affection the world hadn't taken from them yet. Of course, not all marriages were good. Some were miserable, violent, forced. Patriarchy doesn't vanish during a pandemic, but many were something else. Partnerships forged in hardship. 2 people clinging to one another in the storm, building something fragile and deeply human from the scraps. Sometimes that meant love. Sometimes it just meant not being alone. And somehow, in spite of it all, children were still being born. little red-faced bundles of flailing limbs and loud opinions. Midwives still hurried through the streets with their aprons tied tight and their sleeves rolled up. Birth still happened by firelight, on straw, with whispered prayers and boiling water. New life, in the middle of all this death. You wonder how that's possible, but you don't question it too hard. You just hold the baby when it's handed to you and you cry for the first time in weeks, not from grief, but from something else, something quieter, softer, hope. Because next we turn to the heart of the community, the village green, the centre of gossip, celebration and social life, a place where, even during plague, peasants found ways to laugh, argue, trade, and remember what it meant to be alive. The baby cries again, not from illness, but from sheer indignation at being alive. You hush it gently, rocking back and forth near the fire. In the corner, someone's mending a boot. Outside, a dog barks once sharply, and then is quiet again. The silence stretches between people like wool, soft, warm, worn thin by overuse. But eventually someone says, "We should go to the green." It's not a question, just a quiet statement, and everyone knows what it means. Even during the plague, the village green is still the place where people go to feel like people. It's not just a patch of grass. It's the market, the square, the newsstand, the court, the courthouse, the comedy club, the confession booth, the dance floor, and the complaint department, all rolled into one. So you pull on your cloak, wrap the baby tight, and head outside. The air is cool and smells of wood smoke, old cabbage, and sheep. A comforting scent, if not an appetizing one. You follow the worn path to the green, past the empty homes, the shuttered chapel, the place where the tanner used to whistle while he worked. He's gone now, but his bench is still there. His tools still rust quietly in the sun. The green isn't crowded, nothing is anymore. But there's a pulse here, a rhythm. A handful of villagers gathered around a cart with cloth for trade. A boy playing with a carved stick, pretending it's a sword. Two women whispering and glancing at the reeve's wife, who's wearing a suspiciously clean bonnet. Gossip doesn't die. It just lowers its voice. This is where the real business of village life happens. Trade still flows, barely. Eggs for wool, salted fish for firewood, a bottle of vinegar for a promise. You pass a man arguing over the price of dried apples. He's gesturing with one hand and hiding his cough with the other. No one says anything. Trust, like grain, is in short supply. And yet, people smile, quietly, carefully. A child sneezes and is immediately wiped down with a sprig of mint someone claims is good for chasing death out of the nose. No one questions it. Someone else sets down a stool and begins to play a wooden flute. A slow, simple melody that sounds like something older than the village itself. Before the plague, the green would be loud with celebration. Seasonal festivals, saints' days, maypole dances, wrestling matches, a travelling peddler with ribbons and combs. But now, joy comes in smaller portions. A shared joke, a stolen kiss, a loaf of bread traded for a song. Laughter is cautious, like lighting a candle in the wind, but it still happens. It has to. Medieval peasants didn't have entertainment in the way we do now. There was no theatre, no novels, no Netflix. The social life of the village was the show, and everyone played a part. The gossip alone could fill volumes. Who's sleeping with whom? Who owes who a bushel of oats? Who's been stealing onions? Who found a silver coin buried in the cow pasture and swears it was cursed? These stories are passed around like bread, growing weirder and more wonderful with each retelling. You find a spot near the well and listen. Someone saying that Brother Anselm, the priest from 2 villages over, hasn't aged a day in 20 years and might be an immortal. Someone else swears they saw the bailiff crying in the barley field last week. No one questions that one. Everyone's cried in the barley field at least once. You notice that the baker's widow is wearing her husband's old cloak, even though it doesn't fit. A subtle act of mourning and of comfort. You also notice that her daughter is holding hands with a carpenter's apprentice, very much hoping no one sees, everyone sees. There's something strangely comforting about it all. Even in a world shrunk by fear and sickness, people still find each other, still trade, still flirt, still argue, still offer a spare onion to someone who looks too thin. It's messy, imperfect, but it's alive. That's what the green gives you. Not peace exactly, but proof that life goes on. Someone mentions that the Feast of St. Radigan is coming, or should be anyway. No one's sure whether to celebrate. But a few women nod, quietly. They'll bake what they can. Maybe a little music, maybe not. Maybe just a fire and a few voices raised in song. It might be enough. The sun starts to dip low, casting long shadows across the earth. People begin to drift back toward their homes. The flutist tucks his instrument into his belt. The boy drops his stick sword and goes running after a dog. You rise, gently shifting the baby's weight, and begin walking back along the path you came. Behind you, the green settles into stillness again, but you carry its warmth with you. That strange mix of survival, community, and stubborn daily joy. Because for all the fear, for all the death, for all the empty places at the table, you're still here, still upright, still making jokes, still trading eggs, still watching two people pretend they're not in love. And in a world this broken, that's a kind of miracle. But life isn't just made of gatherings and gossip. There's also the quiet work, the unglamorous, unspoken labour that keeps a peasant's life running, even during the plague. Spinning, mending, dyeing, scouring, shearing, weaving, carrying, cutting, cleaning. So sleep well tonight, because next we'll step into the domestic world of medieval peasant labour and discover how much of your survival depends not on swords or saints, but on the humble thread pulled through fabric by candlelight. You return home as the light fades, your arms full, a handful of turnip greens, a cracked bowl someone was throwing away, and a spool of coarse yarn you traded for a few eggs. Nothing fancy, but enough. Enough to keep going. Inside the house, the fire's been stoked again. The pot over the hearth bubbles with something vaguely edible. Children's feet thud softly against packed earth. Someone is patching a tunic in the corner, brow furrowed, thread between their teeth. The rhythm of the evening has begun. This is what keeps the world turning now. Not kings or castles, not knights or battles, but this small invisible labour that happens behind every closed door, work that doesn't make it into history books, but without it, no one survives. In peasant households, labour is constant. There are no weekends, no rest days, no finish line. There's only what still needs to be done. You sit down near the fire and stretch out your legs. Your hands are raw from farm work, but tonight's chores are quieter. You pick up a bone-handled needle and begin stitching the sole of a boot. The leather is cracked, stiff with age. You press your thumb into the thread, knotting it tightly, the way your mother showed you. Because in this world, everything is reused. Everything is patched. Clothes are worn until they fall apart, then rewoven, restitched, repurposed. A shirt becomes a child's tunic. A cloak becomes bedding. Rags become bandages. Doll clothes, scrubbers, kindling. Nothing is wasted. Textiles take time. Wool has to be shorn, cleaned, carded, spun. Linen has to be soaked, scraped, woven. Dyes are made from roots, moss, beetles, berries. The brightest colours, deep blues, blood reds, golden saffrons, are too expensive for anyone but the church or nobility. You make do with earthy browns, weathered greens, the grey beige of good hard cloth. And it's mostly women who do this work. Not because it's easy, but because it's essential. Spinning, weaving, sewing, scouring, mending, baking, salting, pickling, gathering, milking. The list stretches longer than the daylight. It's physical, repetitive, often invisible. But without it, everything unravels. Literally. Even the things you don't think of as work. Sweeping, fetching water, keeping the fire lit, chasing the goat out of the grain sack for the 5th time today. All of it adds up. You don't keep track of hours. You wouldn't want to know. In wealthier households there are servants for these things. Cooks, maids, nursemaids. But here, in a peasant hut during the plague, if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. There's always something. The roof leaks again. The thatch needs retying. The door sags. The floor smells like mildew. The stew is sticking to the bottom of the pot. The thread snapped in the middle of the seam. The youngest child just spilled water on the last good blanket. You sigh, quietly, but you don't stop. Because peasant resilience is made up of tiny, constant movements, stitch by stitch, task by task, a slow defence against a world that keeps trying to fall apart. And sometimes, in the middle of it all, you find peace. The hush of spinning wool, the scrape of a knife against bark, the flicker of firelight on the wall as someone hums an old song you forgot you remembered. You exhale. The sound of it is soft, steady. Not quite happy, but not miserable either. Just here. Evening settles like a blanket over the village. Outside the wind shifts. You hear the faint jingle of a bell. Not the church bell this time, but something smaller. A goat or a child's toy or the travelling peddler you haven't seen in months. You close your eyes and listen. You think of how many people never come home. How many spinning wheels now sit silent. How many cloaks were left half sewn. But still someone lights the fire. Still someone boils the stew. Still someone gathers nettles for dye, plucks feathers for bedding, sharpens the blade that will carve the next bowl. The play can take many things, but it cannot stop this rhythm, this heartbeat, this deeply human need to keep making something out of almost nothing. You set the boot aside, it's better now. Not perfect, but better. The children have fallen asleep, arms sprawled across the straw mattress. Someone snoring gently. The fire sighs. You lean back against the wall and let your eyes drift half closed. Outside it's dark, but not silent, because tomorrow there will still be work to do. The quiet kind, the necessary kind, the kind that builds villages and feeds families and weaves generations together. And after that? Well, after that, we'll walk the road. Because some peasants, when they had nothing left to mend, nowhere left to go and no one left to bury, began to leave, on foot, with a bundle over one shoulder and nothing but questions in their heart. You wake before dawn. The fire's gone out. The coals are cold. The room is dark except for the soft glow of early light pressing through the slats in the wall. Everyone else is still asleep, curled into blankets, limbs tangled, breath slow and steady. But you are already dressed. The bundle is packed. The boots are laced. You've said your goodbyes without saying a word. It's time to leave. You don't know exactly where you're going. Just away. Away from the graveyards. Away from the empty houses. Away from the ache in your chest every time you stir the pot and realise there's one less bowl on the table. And you're not the only one. By 1350, tens of thousands of peasants began to move. Some left their villages behind in search of work. Others fled illness, hunger, fear. A few were driven out. Many simply disappeared down the road and never returned. They were called sturdy beggars, landless folk, wanderers. They were feared by lords and officials, A floating, unpredictable population that didn't belong anywhere and owed nothing to anyone. In reality, most were just like you. People who had lost too much and stayed still for too long. You sling the bundle over your shoulder, bread, a knife, a wool cloak, a piece of twine with 2 copper coins tied at the end. It's not much, but it's enough. The road is wet from last night's rain. The mud sticks to your boots in heavy clumps. You pass the church without looking. The chapel bell hasn't rung in days. You pass the smithy, silent. The forge cold. You pass the green, empty, except for one broken stool and the flutter of a torn prayer flag caught on the well rope. No one calls after you. Not because they don't care, but because they understand. Wandering is a gamble. You might find work. You might find plague. You might find something better. Or you might walk until your feet split and your will fades, and then lie down under a hedge and let the road forget you. Still, you walk. Some villages welcome you. Others chase you off with pitchforks. You sleep in barns, in ditches beneath the trees. You drink from streams. You share fire with other travellers. Men with hollow eyes and women who carry 3 children and no name. You trade stories. You trade bread. You trade songs. Sometimes someone tells you about a manor that's lost half its workers. They're offering coin, they say, 3 pennies a week and a roof. You don't run toward it. You just keep walking 1 step at a time because that's what peasants do. Move forward, slowly, patiently, like the seasons, like the land. Eventually you find a place. A small village you've never heard of where the lord's men look tired and the reeve doesn't ask too many questions. You're offered work, a corner of a barn to sleep in, a bowl of something warm. You nod and say thank you. You'll build something here maybe. Patch a fence, plant some beans, help roof a cottage, maybe even meet someone. Someone who doesn't ask where you came from, only whether you'd like more stew. That night, you lie down on a pile of straw, under a blanket that smells like wood smoke and sheep. The air is cool, your muscles ache, but your belly is full. And for the first time in a long while, you feel something that's almost peace. Above you the stars blink quietly, crickets sing, a dog barks once then settles. Somewhere in the distance a wheel creaks. A cart late returning from market. You close your eyes. The sounds of the night wrap around you like wool, slow, familiar, steady. These were the sounds medieval peasants fell asleep to. A crackling hearth, the breath of animals, a lullaby hummed in a language older than memory, rain on thatch, wind in the trees, the steady rhythm of labour, love, grief, and survival. And now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts begin to drift like smoke through the rafters, you join them. The peasants who lived and died, laughed and wept, laboured and dreamed, long before your name was ever written down. Because their world, for all its hardship, was still human, and in the quiet of the night you can still feel it. Thank you for taking this journey and for walking the fields, stirring the pots, and listening to the forgotten heartbeat of history. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, feel free to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment about where you're listening from. It's always lovely to know who's falling asleep with us, and what time it is on your side of the world. For now, rest easy. You've survived another day.